Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Progress America Unfiltered. Tyler and Rhett here today to talk about George Santos. George Santos recently spent some time in a courtroom going over some alleged crimes that he committed. Tyler's going to walk us through all 13 counts of the alleged crimes that George Santos took part in. We know George Santos to be a liar. We know him to be a con man. We know him to be a representative from New York and a Republican. The Republican and con part feel kind of intertwined, but George Santos seems to lower that bar every single time as he tells more and more lies. Tyler, what do you think about George Santos?
You know, I think he's America's favorite fraudster, and I'm really excited to know that as much fun that we have had over the past few weeks, and just me in my personal life making fun of him and his lies and his crimes, it is good to know that the system of justice is kind of working and that he's going to be held to account for at least some of the crimes that he's committed as of now. So the Hill reports that Santos was indicted in New York on 13 federal charges. They range in substance from deceiving donors, lying on financial disclosure forms, fraudulently receiving unemployment benefits. So let's go through the list of crimes. So counts 1 through 5 were wire fraud counts, fraudulent political contributions, solicitation schemes. We love some
Classic.
Money fraud. Yeah, classic. Then counts 6 through 8 were unlawful monetary transactions over $10,000. That part's important. Then count 9, a little solo count, was theft of public money. Counts 10 and 11 were for more wire fraud, but this time it was fraudulent application and receipt of employment benefits. That's going to be important later, so hold on to that. Then we've got count 12, which is false statements on his 2020 House disclosure reports, and count 13 is a similar thing. So that is all 13 counts. Before we even go further into these counts, I just have to say, he's the hardest working man in Washington right now to have that many counts so quickly.
Yeah, he just got here. He just got elected to the House of Representatives, and he's already running for re-election with the support of Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House. Wow. George Santos just is one of those people that just seem like there is no lie he will not tell. And yeah, I mean, 13 counts in such a short period of time. It's really hard to wrap your mind around it. And also just kind of thinking about right now, with Donald Trump spending time in a courtroom recently, with George Santos in a courtroom right now, it seems like the GOP in Washington, D.C. needs a punch card or something for the amount of court visits that we are seeing from them in these recent weeks.
Absolutely. And it's like a game of follow the leader. You know, Trump did it best, I think, and has done it best for the entirety of his career in terms of frauding people, general schemes, and all of his alleged antics. And so, I think this is what happens. This is the trickle-down effect that the Republicans want to see. So, yeah, I do think it's hilarious that, he's a first-term member of the House, and he's already frauding his paperwork and disclosure forms. It's your first time doing it and you're already going to try a crime. That's pretty bold. I would at least get the lay of the land first, but that's just me. I don't know. I'm more of a stake out the situation type of criminal, not a just go in guns blazing criminal.
Oh, there you go.
But
planning ahead. Wow.
This is all super interesting and very ironic because if you remember, I told you to hold on to it. Counts 10 and 11 that Santos garnered were for the fraudulent application for and receipt of unemployment benefits. And Rhett, do you want to take a wild guess on what George Santos did immediately after getting indicted in New York? What he did immediately after?
Yeah, well, I just know George Santos to be somebody that just cares so much about his job. So, of course, he returned to Washington, D.C. And did he vote on this legislation, Tyler?
He sure did. The fraudster himself returned to Washington, D.C. to vote for a bill in favor of a bill that cracks down on unemployment fraud and basically incentivizes states to recoup any money that is lost due to unemployment fraud. So there's a lot of irony in there that somebody who was just indicted for unemployment fraud is immediately turning around and voting for a bill that would honestly impact him more than anyone else, which is very interesting. But I want to get into, so first of all, let's be specific. The Hill reports that federal prosecutors allege that Santos fraudulently received more than $24,000 in unemployment benefits. So this is really the pot calling the kettle black here. Hilarious. But then Jason Smith, who is a Republican who sits on the chair of the House committee that oversees unemployment and had to do with this bill, literally is quoted saying, "It just shows that unemployment fraud is real, and that's why we need to pass this," when asked about George Santos' fraud.
Stop it. It's just, wow. And then like you imagine that like the law and order House Republicans are going to do something about George Santos just being somebody that lies over and over again. But you know that Kevin McCarthy does not want to give up that seat. He knows that it's a Biden +8 seat and that he does not want to give it up. He does not want to see George Santos resign. He doesn't want to see George Santos give up that seat because they know that this will like impede their power grab. They need George Santos to like toe the line of the Republican Party, to break the tie in the House of Representatives wherever he can, and to just be like a steadfast Republican in his beliefs. But this isn't, I think this like goes back to the point of like George Santos is not an exception to like the modern day GOP. I mean, he might be a symptom of it, but it's just like they're falling in line behind him. Anybody could call in his resignation. Kevin McCarthy could call in his resignation, but they all understand the importance of keeping him in the House of Representatives because they do not think that these crimes are enough to expel him from the House. They don't think that these crimes are enough to make him known as the fraudster that he is, because they need him to push their agenda, again, which is so harmful to the American people. So they can pretend to care about things like unemployment fraud or whatever they want to call it, while George Santos is the one perpetuating this problem.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, stating this plainly, it's important to note that this is my speculation, right? It's not even a question of, oh, we need to like call on him to resign. Like that's not even in the equation, right? House Republicans have a very, very slim majority in the House. It is not wide enough to be allowing people, fraudsters or not, to be sent home packing, especially in a district that has been so strongly for Biden. And, you know, as a side note, New York State Democrats, where I moved from, so I feel like I can say this, New York State Democrats really dropped the ball in this race. They were not paying attention. It was kind of being treated as a given, which is how Santos won in the first place. Was we weren't doing our due diligence and reaching out to voters and mobilizing voters to get them to the polls and acting like because it's a blue district, we should just, you know, it'll be fine. This is the consequence of that, right? But now that there's been so much public attention and scrutiny on Santos and this seat, it is well known that it's not impossible for a Republican to win this seat if there was another election or when there's another election. But, you know, it is very, very unlikely that this seat will go as ignored as it was in 2022, right? So that's really important. We have a slim majority in the House, so we know that McCarthy is not going to just kick out somebody who's on his team. And then it's also important to note that you can't appoint House of Representative members. You can't. You have to be elected by the people. Unfortunately, Santos was. So we have to wait until another election, which is why, again, a whole resignation thing, I just don't see that in the cards. I think it's been pretty clear since the beginning, once these things came out, that if a resignation was on the table, that would have already happened. But I do want to circle back to just the importance of highlighting the hypocrisy and literally having a chairperson on a committee about unemployment fraud saying, well, I'm going to have this unemployment fraudster, alleged unemployment fraudster, vote on this bill in my favor. Because, hey, doesn't that prove that we need the bill? I just think it's so at first silly, and then it stops being funny, haha, when you really just sit down and think about that this is like the state that we're in right now.
Oh, totally. And, you know, I'm kind of thinking on what you just said about the New York State Democrats and just kind of taking these elections for granted. George Santos is somebody that shows what happens when we don't pay attention to an election. George Santos and liars like him that are looking to public office to get rich quick, to get some wealthy donors in their court, definitely benefit from when we don't look at elections. They benefit from the silence. They benefit from like the shadows that are cast over an election and when we don't pay attention to it. So when we vote, when we mobilize, when we make sure that people like George Santos cannot hold office, that's where we're looking to actually like expel the reasons that people like George Santos are able to get and hold on to power in the first place. And also just like, of course, recognizing, as you just stated, that George Santos is, of course, somebody that has the support of the Republican Party. And it's like, yeah, no, although it's awful, they still support it. They do. And they probably still will because they need those numbers. Tyler.
Absolutely. The votes are cashing. I think that's what's more important at the end of the day. They don't care what you've done. Similar to, Trump, as we've seen, and all of these other people. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what you believe. It just matters if at the end of the day, your votes and your checks cash. I don't know if Santos's checks are cash since most of them are fraudulent, but we definitely know that his votes cash.
Absolutely. And yeah, Tyler, I think this was a really great conversation about George Santos. There is so much to say about George Santos because it seems like his story changes every day. I mean, there is just more to talk about with George Santos because he makes something up every day. It is always going to be good content because he's always creating content. He wakes up in the morning, he's like, yeah, I think I'll tell a new lie today about my origin story. I mean, it's very Batman villain-esque, I feel like is what we've called it before, but it truly is that. I feel like he sees his past in a black and white or a sepia tone, movie roll tape, whatever. I mean, it's totally wild, but it is always going to make good content. Tyler, we mentioned some overarching themes here, just the need for Republicans to keep their numbers up in the House of Representatives, the motivating factors of cash in politics. Is there anything else you want to loop this all together with before we close out?
I think the cherry that can, go on top of all of this is it is very, very funny. It's hilarious that we have this larger than life character who's kind of bumbled his way into politics. But we have to understand that the systems have been set up for him to succeed. The fact that we can't get him out of the House right now, the fact that he's bold enough to be running for re-election, and the fact that we're still waiting to see, even though he's been indicted, that does not mean he's innocent until proven guilty, as the saying goes. So we will see, and we need to continue paying attention and making sure that this person is held to account. And also, let's, maybe all do some self-reflection, especially, New York Democrats, and see the ways that we all kind of led to a person like this's rise in the political sphere. But that's it. That's all I've got.
Yeah. And Tyler, thank you so much for this conversation. When we were talking to our producers about this, we were thinking maybe George Santos thinks he's in a season of Succession or something, that these lies are all just pregame for some upcoming drama reality show or whatever that is coming down the pike in a few years when he eventually, hopefully, leaves office and signs a deal with Netflix or something. Tyler, thank you so much for this conversation. This was really an important one. I feel like we're going to have so much more content of George Santos coming up because, wow, this man is always going to be something to talk about. Anyway, everybody, make sure you share, comment, and subscribe. Tell us what you think about George Santos. Do you have any favorite or least favorite lies that he tells? We want to hear them down below. Let us know, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.